Good evening and welcome to the Kitchen to Shelf Creating Winning Sales Communication webinar. I'm Steve Clear, and joining me tonight, my wife, Deborah Armstrong. We're going to be talking to you about creating sales communication, winning sales communication, we hope. But it's an often overlooked part of the business that we get a lot of questions about. So we decided we would take a little bit of time and just try to cover basically some of the highlights as much as we can within the webinar. So what we're going to talk about tonight is basically the art and science of sales communication, your brand story and style, which should be something that all of you are very close to, and the basic communication tools that we use in the business to get the story out there. So first of all, there's an art and science part of this, and let's think about it. Selling is basically communication. So sales communication is just a natural flow. You're trying to impart information, you're trying to educate a consumer or a buyer into taking your products. And last but not least, selling is also, of course, persuasion. And it's trying to get them to understand why your product is better, tasting why your product is better. All of that is part of sales communication and the basic tools that you have to use to get that story out there. The art, what is the art of sales communication? The art is language to begin with. So you're trying to communicate. There are ways you can talk about your products. There are ways you can talk about your company, your brand story, and whatever to get something beyond just words out there for people. Graphics, very important. So the graphics, whether it's the color of your logo or the colors involved with your food or your beverage, any of those type of things, very important. Graphics, of course, how you portray that. Do you portray it in really big fonts like the one we have above? Do you go with different types of, maybe muted graphics or something that looks a little bit more muted? There's a tremendous discussion within food, and always has been, about graphics and colors, particularly when you go to darker colors or even to black and more stark types of graphics. And 10 years ago, you wouldn't see a black package or a black sell sheet for food or beverage anywhere around. Now you see a whole bunch of them. In fact, reverse type out used to be something you didn't have, right? White coming out of a darker color. Now you have it all the time. And then, of course, fonts and styles, because they represent a little bit of the personality and how your brand looks to people. The science, on the other hand, is what communication tools you use to support your business, the type of messaging that you put out there, the number of impressions that you get. In other words, how many people actually see it, how many people actually hear it. And then, of course, the regular tools of the trade that we all know, and we'll talk about those: business cards, brochures, sell sheets. Very important is the brand story. Again, something in the last 5 or 6 years has become super important. You can do whole webinars on nothing but brand stories. The brand story for founders and entrepreneurs basically starts with your story. We have a lovely example here from the folks at Sonoma Creamery, talking about how they're inspired by the agriculture of Sonoma. And of course, they have the best cows and the greatest land because it grows great wine and all of that information. So, but your story may in fact start before that. Your story may be, my family was involved in the business and I decided to take it to this next level. Your story could be, I was a high up executive in a tech firm, and I just got tired and I wanted to do something that was more important and purposeful. So again, that's your story, and you're going to bring your story to your brand story. The product story is one of itself. So did you use your grandmother's recipe? Did you decide to invent a smoothie that had some sort of extra stuff in it, vitamins and other things? The product story is very important because that comes out of your story. It's why you chose this particular product, and as important, why you're trying to take this product to market. So product story, important. There's also a brand personality. I think if you were looking at Sonoma Creamery, for instance, you'd see that it's a very sort of open area. It has a professional air to it, as you would want for a dairy product, and a great picture with, from Sonoma, where that just looks awesome. The brand personality can be a funny one. So Genius Juice is a funny brand personality. They dress up in wigs. They do a lot of different things. There's more staid types of personalities that you're going to have your brand be as well. It sort of depends upon what type of product you are, what category you're in, and important, go back to your story, what's your personality as a founder, as the president or CEO, and how much of that personality is going to come through into your brand. Last but not least, you have a brand style. And brand style, basically, when we're talking here, we're talking about two things. We're talking about the brand style overall. So is it a formal style? Is it a more relaxed style? We're also talking about something that you develop as part of a railroad track for your communications. And by that, I mean the brand style says, we are going to put Sonoma Creamery always in this font, always in this type. And we are going to always put the Sense 1935 in it, right? Because that's dictated. Every time we use it, that's what we use. We don't refer to Sonoma Creamery in anything other than Sonoma Creamery. We don't call it Sonoma Cheese Company. We don't call it whatever. That's a brand style. And many of you will be preparing actually a brand style guide that will go through all of those things, particularly when you start working with third-party communication agencies, influencers, whatever. You want to make sure that the brand style is out there and you have control over that. Here's a brand story I've always loved. So this is Epic, and you may have heard about them. So they were a couple who basically became vegetarians and then developed a meat-based protein bar. But that's neither here nor there. This basically, the Epic Quest, the whole idea of Epic and what they were trying to do was to get back to foods more paleo, more like their ancestors and whatever else. But on top of that, they also wanted to save the bison. And so they used bison in order to save them, in order to get them so that they were, again, breeding them and having them out on the plains and all of those things. And it was a big deal. And Epic was one of those great little companies that General Mills decided one day they wanted to take a share in, and they took actually a majority share, as it turns out. And I remember the webinar that the folks did, and they were talking about how excited they were and how they thought this was really going to bring their purpose to fruition and everything else. And of course, about a year and a half later, they leave and go on to do something else. And now Epic is just done by General Mills, and I don't really know how the bison are doing. So let's talk about sales communication tools. Sales communication tool, primary tool, is your packaging. Your packaging is probably going to be the first thing that 90% of people who buy your product ever see about your product. They won't see you on Facebook. They won't see you in the farmer's market. They will see you in a retail store. And that packaging is going to be what speaks to them for the first time. So it's a very important tool. And it goes into all of those things of the brand story needs to be there and all of those things that you're trying to convey. Sell sheets are very important, and sell sheets are basically a sales communication tool that you use not for your consumers, but for your third parties, for your distributors, for your buyers at retail, for people that you're interested in maybe taking on the product in some way. But it has basic information to it that you need to have, and it's important that, of course, it's done correctly. You have business cards and brochures, very traditional business cards. Brochures are also great for being able to get a little bit more of the brand story out there in a larger format. So maybe it's a trifold that's cut into 3 pieces, or it can be a whole 8.5 by 11 2-side if you need to. But a brochure basically encapsulates a lot of that brand story and gives people more of a background about what your product is and what you're trying to accomplish as a founder, as an entrepreneur. And last but not least, the big 3. There's media out there that you can use, including social media. There's advertising, paid advertising, and also public relations. And we'll touch on all these just a little bit. Let's start with packaging now. So packaging, as I mentioned, is the first communication you have, usually with your consumer. And we have a great example here of a pouch bag of dried pears from the folks at Sunrise Fresh. And if any of you have been around, you may know the Samuels family who owns Sunrise Fresh, one of my great clients. And this is basically an idea of trying to get people's attention through not only the pretty pictures, but also through a nice, clean look and a major, major call out, no sugar added. So packaging should tell a story, and I think this tells the story. It tells the story of the fact that we're showing both fresh pears and we're showing them dried, the actual product. We're conveying a certain taste so that it looks as though it's something that, even though it's dried, it's quote unquote fresh. And you do that through, of course, all the pretty pictures that you need to have. The claim is on there, no sugar added. And then basically, we're taking an adaptation of colors, shapes, and textures, which we're taking initially from the fruit itself, and then adding the colors that blend in with that. And of course, the bar on the bottom that carries the information about made in America, non-GMO, and of course our weight that we have to have on there. What most people don't know about the fact is that most of your packaging, probably 60% of it is dictated by what you have to have on it. And obviously you have to have a logo, a product description, claims, the weight, as we mentioned. Take a look at the back. The back also has to have things on it, have to have nutrition facts on it. They have to have ingredients, right? You want to put other things on there. You have to have the corporate address on there of who has been producing it. Plus, you want to talk a little bit about it. A healthy snacking alternative the whole family can use. It's those kind of things that make your packaging. So you want to translate as much of the brand story and your story into the package as you can to get people's attention, plus the visuals to get them to realize it's probably going to taste good, which is a very important part of all this. Sell sheets. So sell sheets they're sort of an industry standard for sell sheets, and they're basically 8.5 by 11, printed one side or two sides with information. The information is there mainly for buyers. So it's mainly for folks at retail or distributors who need to get to know facts about your product and have all those facts in one place. Now, you still want pretty pictures. That doesn't change from packaging. And you want some call outs, as you can see here with the dippable pretzel balls. But there's no pricing involved in sell sheets. And part of the reason for that is simply because you want to be able to alter your pricing from time to time. You also want to be able to alter your pricing if you're talking to a distributor or directly to a retailer. And so it's just tradition that we don't do pricing on sell sheets. We have price sheets that go on after that. So Pretzelman's is two-sided, and again, 3 delicious flavors, artisan pretzel balls to choose from, flavors, photography, the nutritional facts, the ingredient statement under each one. His UPC codes are not printed out on the back, but they are down in the bar below for each of the items. There are claims you can continue on the back. You don't want to get outrageous about it because the buyer is not going to really care about that. And then your pack out. What's your pack out? Pack out is how your individual units are packaged by case. How many of those cases make up a shipper? How many of them make up a pallet? What does it weigh? Those are things that are important because a buyer is going to want to know that in terms of where you're going to go in the store or how you're going to come into the store. And then, of course, information of how to contact the person, how to contact the company, and again, the corporate address, very important to have. So this is just a little bit bigger. You can see the different applications. Sell sheets are very important because if you don't have one, then people go, oops, it's like not having a business card or a website. Here's the bottom. Again, you can see the UPC codes. Many people actually will print the UPC code on the sell sheet underneath each of them. The one thing about that is to make sure that it works, because the retailer will use that to scan into their system. And if it doesn't work, you check it. If it doesn't work, then you want to get it, you want to get it fixed. And again, case pack, case weight, cases cubed, pallet weight, we've got everything here. And of course, manufactured in Brooklyn, New York. Business cards and brochures are the older things of the trade, but certainly you want your business cards to look professional, and you want to make sure that your logo is very prominent because it's one of the best ways of keeping that in front of people when they see the card. Colors, very important. Colors matching, whatever the colors on your packaging, whatever your corporate colors are, carry them through to your business cards. Don't try to get into doing a very super artsy kind of card that's very hard to read or something that has too much information on it. Save the information for the brochure. The business card should be basically contact, this is the product information. Maybe you print a little something extra on the back. I remember a guy that I worked with for years from Time Magazine. He was a space salesman for the magazine. And his business card was really cool because on the front it was all English. In the back, you turn it over, it was all Japanese because he did a lot of business with Japanese companies. You can have really good photography as an opportunity for both the brochure and business cards. Again, make sure it's done professionally, not by Cousin Larry. You want it done so that it is a really high quality. You should have your website address very prominent because, again, that becomes the new sort of communication piece that we have that people are going to go to if they're really interested. And last but not least, no home address. If you're working out of your home, doesn't matter. No home address in your business card for those things. Not a good idea. If you don't have a quote-unquote professional address at this point, if you can't use the address, for instance, of your commercial kitchen or whatever, you may want to consider doing something like a FedEx office or a UPS office or whatever so that you can get an actual street address, but without having to without having to have actually an office. But one of the important things about that is that a lot of places will check to make sure that whatever address you have on there is a street address, an actual street address. And last but not least, you don't necessarily need an address on it at all. If you want people to come through and communicate with you only through phone and website, then you could just do that. Website.
Oh, Steve, can I throw something in there really quick, by the way?
Sure.
So I'm going to come over close to the mic. It's Deb here.
You don't have to come over close to the mic. It hears you just fine.
So one of the things that I want to remind people of is you should have a professional email address. So people look at your address, and if you have, tastytreats@gmail.com, that says you're not professional to some people. In fact, we just had one person that was the Fancy Food Show, one of our clients, and she was talking to Steve about a gentleman that said he was a distributor, wanted to know this and that. And she goes, and then I looked at his card and he had, so-and-so distributor at Gmail. And she's like, obviously, he's not very professional. That was her first thing without me going off on my little tangent on email addresses.
It's absolutely true, and unfortunately today it's one of those things. But yeah, she did call it out to me immediately, and I totally agreed. And I said, you need to set it up. It's, I don't know what it is, $6 a month, $10 a month. You need to be able to take your email through your website. Is what you want to do. So again, it's it says announces a level of professionalism in the selling process, and you want to be able to do that. But talking about websites real quick, primary communication vehicle now is the website, and whether people are sending email to you through it or whether they're going and looking at your products, they're going to be perusing your website before they're probably going to be buying any of your product. It's also a main selling tool for most people. So if you're involved in e-commerce and you're selling off your website, or if your website links directly to your Amazon page, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's still a main selling tool. And people will, if they're interested in your products, interested in your company, are going to roam around your website a little bit. So if you did a blog when you started your website 2 years ago and you haven't added anything to it in a year and a half, take the blog part out, because nobody's interested in seeing that you haven't been dealing with your website. It's a credibility tool. At this point, having a website is just about the number one thing for having a business existing at all. So therefore, the website should look and should enhance the credibility of both your company and your product line. Update and protect your website. So a not constant, but certainly a recurring update every 6 months, every 3 months, whatever, to your website, whether that's a blog or whether that's an addition of something else that's in there, or just changing some of the pages around, very important. And also protection, monitoring your website doesn't get hacked, all of those other things. Check with your provider, whether it's Bluehost or whoever it is, to make sure, check in the mail to make sure that your stuff is working the way it should. And last but not least, don't let your website become a rabbit hole. Although it's very important and it is the main selling tool and our primary communication vehicle, and it shouts your credibility. It is not in itself a work of art that needs to be spent 24 hours, a day on to get right. That's not the purpose. The purpose is for it to serve as a communication vehicle, to serve as a selling tool. But people can spend a ton of money and a ton of time on getting an incredible website, while meanwhile their relationship with their co-packer has gone to hell and they have production problems. So just try to remember the website's there, but don't become fixated by it. We're going to visit real quick the Sonoma Creamery people again, because I really like how clean, for a food product especially, their stuff is. They just have a really, really nice textured background on there. It looks clean. It looks like you could eat the stuff right off the photograph. It's very uncomplicated, quality products made from simple ingredients since 1931. Note the brand style. The 1931 is repeated in the copy up there. And very simple: shop, about, where to buy, recipes, contact. That's all we need. We don't need a dozen other things up there. You want to buy something? Bam, here we are. You want to know something about us? Okay, that's great. Store locator, that's the where to buy. Recipes, for sure. We can put all that stuff in there. We can maybe get some user-generated content going there, whatever else. And last, not a very, very simple contact and a search. And you're done. And that should work. Back to their story again. So the cheese crisps and cheese bars actually are pretty recent, since about 1914. I was actually at Expo when they launched those, and they were really great. They were just like crack. It's amazing stuff. So that's the website, a good idea of what a website should look like. And here we go. Also, yes, a little bit about using the product as art. So this talks about products. Again, very clean. I like the font. It's just it really works. It's a nice website. And that covers sales communication tools. And now we can probably take some questions if we have some.
Yes, we do actually.
Okay.
So the sell sheets, is that something you just print at home, or?
Good question. So the answer is it depends. If you have a really good color printer at home, photographic quality printer, there's no problem doing it. If not, it's something that's worth doing on glossy paper and having printed. The problem is that you want to digital print it because you don't want to do a run of 500. You won't need 500, right? So you just don't want to go that far, but you want the ones you have professionally done for sure.
And then what about, you talked about you don't have your prices on there, so you have a price sheet. How does that need to be on that same glossy?
No. Price sheet can actually just be typed up. Just a simple piece of paper for a price sheet is fine, and it can have your logo on it or not. You can print it out of your printer. People expect that. They understand that you change that. You change it by the show you go to or what you're doing. But you basically, the information you want to have on there is product description. And there's two different types of these things, not to go down a rabbit hole about it myself, but there's two different types of pricing sheets. There's a pricing sheet and an order sheet. An order sheet is an order form that has all of the different SKUs that you have and the variations. And if you have any discounts and stuff, it's stated on there. And then shipping. So if you are offering free shipping, you want to put that on there. If it's FOB, you want to put that on there so that they understand, the charges for shipping and how that's going to work. And that's an order form. But the pricing sheet basically just covers SKUs. It has a date. It may have an end date on it, but it just covers what the wholesale cost is. And you can do another column for your manufacturer's suggested retail price, which you can put on there, of course, as well, to give a good indication of what kind of margin is there for that retailer. If that answers the question, I hope it did. If not.
And then there's another question. Can't the brochure and the sales sheet be the same thing?
So again, good question. So the answer is no. The brochure is basically for giving out to consumers, not for buyers. There's really way too much information on a sell sheet, and it's a little intimidating and whatever. Consumers really don't care how many are in a case or how much the pallet weighs or anything else. So the brochure is much more of a consumer communication. It's something for you to give to people that explains more about the brand, explains more about the product, right? It's larger than a business, not a business card. We don't care if they get the business card. I want you to have the information about the product, more pretty pictures, take it home, look at it, and then go on the website and buy, or go to the store and buy it.
That looks like the two. And what about kind of pictures? How should you get the pictures done? Are they professional? So professional photos or products for the website?
If it's available in your budget, I always suggest, and obviously coming from having owned agencies, suggest you always work with professionals. But I understand that everybody has a budget. There are people who know how to photograph food, and there are a lot of people who don't. So if you can find a food photography person, look at their portfolio. If it's mostly weddings and portraits, probably stay away. If it's Uncle Larry and Uncle Larry is a photographer, probably not maybe for the first ones you have to do that. But beyond that, again, you're going to be presenting this to a buyer or a category manager or a distributor who has seen hundreds of these and hundreds. And the only thing that stands out to them is when it doesn't look good. So if you have bad coloration in your product, or let's say you do an organic fruit, right? Organic fruit doesn't really look good. I mean, you're much better off with the idea of the fresh fruit than you are with doing anything organic, because it doesn't look good. You want somebody who knows how to deal with that, what type of backgrounds to put them against. If you go back to we send the recording out, you go back to the stuff for Sonoma Creamery, or go to their website and take a look at that picture with all the product on that lovely, either stone or concrete. I really couldn't tell which, but it has texture to it, and it makes the product where they have the cheese and the different things really stick out. And that's something you want to think about, because if I'm not able to taste the product right there, I need to be able to taste it through the photography. And that's really what a good a food stylist, food photographer will be able to do.
Yeah, and a couple other ones on here too. And then on the website, who should they be talking to? We talk about the consumer and the customer. So
right.
The consumer being, the person that's eating it, and then the customer is the person that's
sure.
selling at the retailer. Who's their website talking to?
So basically, your initial landing page, whatever, and let's just assume at this point, and I will assume that you are selling directly from your website as well as maybe Amazon, and you want to sell into retail and other places as well. So if your primary purpose of your website is as a selling tool for consumers, then you orient it that way. A retailer is going to actually, probably a buyer will visit your website, but it's going to be more for the credibility factor than it's going to be the purchasing experience. They're just going to want to see, what you're saying. And if you're selling something through retail, they're also going to look at what you're selling it for in terms of price, because they don't want your product online cheaper than it's in their store. So it really depends. Primarily, I think websites are going to be, for the most part, for smaller and startup companies, they're going to be more consumer oriented than buyer oriented. So it's really more about the brand story, the mission. We want you to purchase the product. Maybe you were going to have a subscription service on your website as well, or whatever. And then you can also, if you're aligned in doing a lot of your business through Amazon. So for instance, with the Sunrise Fresh Dried Fruit line, is our website design is basically done that if you are a consumer and you go to the website and identify you're interested in purchasing product, you are directed immediately to the Amazon company page, because we don't want them wandering around the website looking at the wholesale production or the pictures of the trees in bloom. I mean, they can get that if they want, but that's not the purpose. So their website is a little bit more geared toward food service, a little bit more geared toward buyers, and it really depends upon where you're selling. But if you are selling through your website to consumers, that's the primary thing you want to look at in the design and talk to the designer about, which is what is going to be the consumer experience in visiting my site, and how can I get them to the buy button as quickly as possible.
So the same person that asked the questions before about the design stuff, they actually have another question too. So
sure.
What about the packages? Do you need those, the photography and the graphic designer for packaging? Is that a specific package person?
Another good question. Okay, so the answer is you probably don't need it to start with, but you're going to need it at some point. Again, as the disciplines go, there are people who do packaging design. And I've worked with larger companies where spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a packaging design is not unusual, and companies that like Landor that did those kind of design things. But that's iconic design. That's a lot of money and a lot of time. What you're really trying to look for is, and I think one of the ways to approach this is, if you do not have a graphic bent yourself, like I can only draw stick people, so I don't have a graphic bent at all. I know what I like, but that's about it. Is you go out in the store, and if you're going to stores, or go online to Amazon, do both, in fact, and take a look at what would be considered competitive, maybe not directly, but if you've got them, in your category. Look and see what the packaging looks like. All right, and understand you can try to do something that pops or strays away from that, but you want to look at the elements and where they are. And then if you can work, most quote unquote graphic designers, as long as they're given the proper railroad track, the proper parameters to design packaging in, can do a really good job. And like I mentioned, 60 to 70% of the space in your packaging is dictated by regulation and legality anyway. And if you're going to sell in Canada, you've got to do it in English in the front and French in the back. So, you have a pretty much of a restriction. You want the product as hero. You want your logo. You want your call outs. You want those things. And generally a graphic designer, as opposed to a packaging designer, a specific packaging designer, can do that. But at some point in time, it's also good to aspire to being able to work with people who design packaging for a living. The other aspect about that packaging, I'm talking graphics, photography, and copy, is the actual type of packaging you use. So whether, stand-up gusseted bag, or are you in a glass jar, or are you in, and what does that do? And a lot of people like to get into fancy shapes or whatever, and you have to be very careful about that because of how that plays in retail. You don't want to go too far afield because you can end up designing something that doesn't fit on the shelf or doesn't fit with your category, and it becomes a real problem. But certainly, as professional a look as you can afford is very important, because that's going to be with you a while. You're going to run packaging, and you don't want to run packaging over again or anything else if it's not working. You want to make sure it's done right the first time. So of the share of budget that you have, I would allot a considerable amount to packaging, because it is your statement, and it is your first thing your consumer is going to see.
Good. I think that's all on the questions.
All right.
So good ones there.
And so, folks, thank you very much. And for again, if you have a question, you haven't been able to get it in, you can of course contact us. Steve@kitchen2shelf.com, Deb@kitchen2shelf.com, and we can get those questions answered. We'll also be sending out a link so that you can have this as a recording. It'll be posted on the website. And whoops, I went off there. Here we are. And we can get you that information. So how can we help you out if you're interested? We can do classes and coaching under Kitchen to Shelf, and that's of course LaunchPan coming soon, which will be done right after Ready for Retail. Our master class spring of 2020, we'll be talking to you about that probably in the March webinar, and also startup and growth coaching packages for those of you who would like to have somebody along, a couple of people along with you on the ride that know a little bit about what goes on and how it works. And then, of course, next level, I still do consulting packages in terms of creating distribution plans. They're looking for moving from a regional maybe to a national basis, a marketing review to talk about what you're doing out there, how effective is it, what can you do differently, new product launches and the support of all that, or general food and beverage business planning. So again, feel free to contact us, Deb@kitchen2shelf.com. That's kitchen, the number 2, shelf.com. Or you can also contact me, Steve@nextlevelmarketing.com, and that's with 2 X's. And I think that's our webinar for this evening.
It is.
All right.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, folks, and we'll talk to you next time.